2023 has definitely been one of the more memorable years in gaming. It feels like this is finally the year that the gaming industry recovered from COVID. It really feels like we have a new vibrance and a resurgence in the gaming community and the gaming industry as well. I mean, there's so much great stuff that came out this year alone. It's hard to believe that we got this much good material and this many good games within a single year. And I just wanted to give my personal picks for what I think is going to be nominated at the Game Awards or is even going to win some awards there. So, without any further delay, let's get right into it. It's hard to believe that back in January, we actually got a remake of Dead Space that was really good and didn't fall flat. It was really surprising to see EA follow through on such a beloved remake such as Dead Space and not screw it up like the EA is usually wont to do. I mean, I remember talking to Jared about this, and we both thought that the Callisto Protocol was actually going to be the better version of what the Dead Space remake was trying to be. It ended up being the complete opposite. The Callisto Protocol ended up being the one that performed worse, and not as many people liked it. People thought it was like a shameless rip of Dead Space, which, to be fair, it was. It turns out the Dead Space remake was really faithful to the original, and some even cite it as even scarier because everything is bumped up to a higher resolution, everything has more graphical fidelity, and it really feels like they tried to make some meaningful improvements to the game that weren't present in the original 2008 release. Gameplay is just as scary, if not more so, than the original, and I don't think this game is likely to win Game of the Year, and it's unfortunate that we don't have a Best Horror category in the Game Awards, and I think that's just because there's not enough good quality games that can qualify for that category. Or maybe it's because horror games aren't as marketable as other releases that we'll see here in this list. Either way, I think the Dead Space remake is great. Continuing with the horror theme, and I think this is Jared's personal Game of the Year, is the Resident Evil 4 remake. And although I haven't played it yet, I know, don't worry, it's on my list. I've been playing a lot of Baldur's Gate 3. It looks like the Resident Evil 4 remake, at least from what I've heard from Jared and what I've seen online and all the footage I've seen, it looks like it is a perfect recreation of the original game. And we obviously have some quality of life improvements. I mean, I never thought I'd see a Resident Evil 4 remake where we didn't have to have the tank controls that were present in the original Resident Evil games. And that's definitely a huge quality of life improvement. And seeing all these characters that I remember growing up with that look this good these days, I mean, Leon looks like basically photorealistic in this. And I think that's really cool. Resident Evil 4 was kind of the game where they were trying to get more actiony, where they were trying to morph into sort of like a third-person shooter, and that's where really, I believe, the identity of the franchise started to change. So I wouldn't call it as much of a horror game as Dead Space is. I think they're two different games that try to achieve two different things, but I still think this is one of the best games of the year. And if we did have a horror category in the Game Awards, I would probably put it in that category. Also, I don't think this game was considered because it released in December of 2022, so I think it got pushed until this year's Game Awards, is Marvel's Midnight Suns. And I remember playing that last year when it came out and having such a blast with this game. It reminds me of the old Ultimate Alliance games in terms of feel of how the game plays. I remember just having such a good time with the game, not only because of the turn-based combat from the developers of the XCOM games, so you know the turn-based combat is going to be great. It helps that they got some quality voice talent here, like Tank Dempsey as Wolverine, and even Nolan North as Deadpool, which I thought was amazing. Please, Insomniac or any Marvel developer watching this, please make another Deadpool video game. The first one is so good. I don't think that will win because I don't think licensed games or Marvel games in particular garner enough support from the Game Awards judges, but it would be cool to see it at least get nominated for Game of the Year. But we'll just have to wait and see on that. I think Marvel's Midnight Suns will definitely be nominated for Best RPG, but we'll have to wait and see if it walks home with anything. We also got Final Fantasy 16 this year, and it looks like it's everything that Final Fantasy was looking to go back towards in terms of the medieval aesthetic that the original games were trying to achieve. It's definitely more of a cinematic type of game instead of an RPG like we've gotten used to with Final Fantasy games, especially the recent ones, but it looks like this is where the future of the franchise is headed, at least for now. It's unclear if this is going to be nominated for Game of the Year, but I think this is definitely going to be nominated for Best RPG. Diablo 4 also released. I don't think this is likely to win Game of the Year or maybe even RPG of the Year, just because I think people have a negative connotation to Blizzard these days, and post-launch the game definitely fell flat because the developers nerfed a lot of things in the game. It definitely ended up irritating the player base to the point where I think a lot of them would even agree that Diablo 4 isn't meant to win Game of the Year this year. There's also Street Fighter 6, which came out, and I think this is definitely likely to take home Best Fighting Game of the Year. If not Street Fighter 6, then definitely Mortal Kombat 1. Both of those games are really good, although I think Street Fighter 6 definitely had the better launch, at least when we're talking about Mortal Kombat 1 on the Switch. I mean, come on. No one should play that. I forgot to mention, Alan Wake 2 is also a very likely contender at the Game Awards because it really surprised a lot of people with how good of a successor it was to the original Alan Wake game, while still feeling like a good original idea for a game. But who knows? Maybe this will win Best Action Game. I mean, horror games are really good. We also had Armored Core 6, which is From Software's next game after the massive success that was Elden Ring. And I don't think they're likely to take home a lot of awards for Armored Core 6 this year, just because it's a less popular franchise than the Dark Souls games. They've made a lot of Armored Core games. They're good, but they're not for everybody. And I think that's the main reason why it's not going to take anything home, just because while, yes, they've made difficult games in the past that have a high barrier to entry, I think the massive marketing campaign for Elden Ring also is part of the reason why it took home Game of the Year last year. And I don't think Armored Core 6 has that same type of chance this year. But we'll wait and see. Now for the big games that I think are very likely contenders for Game of the Year. First up, we have Star Wars Jedi Survivor. The new story of this game was amazing. And it fell off in terms of performance. I mean, optimization for just consoles and PC these days just seems like a thing that a lot of developers don't want to do. But I can't argue that this game is an amazing sequel to Star Wars Jedi Fallen Order. But when compared to the other games going against it for Game of the Year, I don't think that this is going to stand a chance in that category. But Cal Kestis is still pretty cool. We also have Cyberpunk Phantom Liberty. I know it's a DLC, but I had this weird sort of feeling that maybe the Game Awards might make an exception for it because Cyberpunk basically is a whole other game. I don't know. You guys tell me in the comments if you think that's a crazy assumption, but maybe we'll see something that's related to Cyberpunk getting a second chance in some way. Maybe they'll have to make a whole new best DLC category for Cyberpunk. Who knows? Just something that I thought of. Now for the big three that came out this year. First up, Tears of the Kingdom. What an amazing follow-up to Breath of the Wild. I mean, talk about a game that should just not work in general, but especially should not be able to work on the Switch with the amount of processing power that the Switch is able to put out and the amount of new additions that the developers of Tears of the Kingdom put into that game. I mean, the traversal and the crafting mechanics that they put into this game are on a whole different level. This is definitely one of the more creative games that I've seen in a long time, considering that the Zelda community has been making tons of cool things within the game. I definitely think it succeeds in a lot of the innovation and a lot of the original ideas that I think previous Game of the Year winners were often praised for and were part of the reason why they ended up taking that award home. I think Tears of the Kingdom is a real big contender for Game of the Year, and it's hard to tell, and you're going to notice it when I compare it to these last two, that I really don't know what's going to walk away with the award here. This is the first time in a while where we've had 3 or 4 big titles that are super deadlocked with each other in terms of the quality of the game and how popular it is with its fan base, how many players are currently playing it, how many copies it's sold. These are hallmark characteristics of what the Game of the Year is, and I don't think we've had a year where we've had this many stars align on this many different games as possible. Now for my personal pick for Game of the Year for 2023. You know what I'm going to say. Spider-Man 2, baby. I am such a sucker for a good Spider-Man story. I mean, you could probably tell that. Not only is the gameplay, like the combat and the traversal, vastly improved upon in this game, but it feels like the meaningful improvements that Insomniac Games has done to Spider-Man 2. I don't know. They kind of feel like puzzle pieces that the 2018 game was missing, and now we've just come full circle, and this feels like the most definitive edition of a Spider-Man video game that we've ever had, really. I think this is the best Spider-Man game we've ever had. Is that a hot take? I don't know. The story of this game was also my favorite part of it. I mean, when you go to Insomniac Games or a lot of different PlayStation studios like them, you're going for the story. Let's be real. And I'm always a sucker for a good Spider-Man story, and one that we've never seen before. An original idea in the Spider-Man fandom is often hard to come by, at least at the level of quality that Insomniac has given us here. It helps that they got monster villains like Kraven the Hunter and Venom in the game. I think that definitely adds to the spectacle of it all, and the amount of suits that they added to the game. I mean, there's so many different things that I could tell you about why Spider-Man 2 could win Game of the Year, but I don't think it's actually going to walk away with that award. And that's because I think the real Game of the Year is Baldur's Gate 3. Every once in a while, there is a video game that comes along that is such a cultural phenomenon that it takes the entire community by storm and everyone is playing it. I remember everyone that I talked to that was playing video games at the time knew about Baldur's Gate 3 and was currently dumping hours upon hours into it. And me myself not being a big D&D person, that's more Jared's thing. Going into this was extremely accessible and I didn't have to know a thing about D&D at all, which is what the whole game is based upon, right? I think the most impressive thing that Larian Studios was able to do with Baldur's Gate 3 is the amount of player choice and player freedom that they were able to insert into that game. I mean, they prepared so many different dialogue options, so many different outcomes to specific quest lines, and just made it a massive D&D playground for the player to immerse themselves in and roleplay to their heart's content. They've also masterfully created every single NPC character in the game. I mean, Karlach, Lae'zel, Halsin, Shadowheart, Astarion. These characters left such an impression on me that I actually struggle to recall the last time I had such memorable experiences with NPCs in a video game. They packed a lot of content into this game too. I mean, I just finally beat my first run of this game earlier this week, and I've dumped about 130 hours into it. This game is long, but it's not all meaningless stuff. Most of it is quality content, and I feel like some of the best stuff in this game is in the side content, stuff you wouldn't know to pursue unless you veered off the main story. And the RPG elements of the game are obviously near perfect. I mean, Larian Studios are the guys who have been creating Divinity Original Sin, so you know the RPG mechanics are going to be top tier in this game. This is probably one of the best games we've had in the past 10 years. I would put Baldur's Gate 3 up there with The Witcher 3 Wild Hunt in terms of quality. And me being a massive Witcher fan, you know, if I'm saying it's up there with The Witcher, this shit's good. I think because it not only had such a massively successful launch, but it also defied expectations of not only all the players that were awaiting the game upon release, but also its peer developing studios. Like, there are so many big studios like EA and Activision and all these different gaming publishers that all were saying Baldur's Gate 3 should not be the standard because it is an unrealistic expectation to have for video games. And to that I say, other gaming companies should study Larian and do better. And ultimately, that's why I think Baldur's Gate 3 is going to win Game of the Year. I'm really excited for the Game Awards this year. It's hard to recall a time when we've had this many successful games launch inside of a single year, and who knows what'll come of award night. I did want to say that although me and Jared usually stream the Game Awards every year, we've made the decision this year to not stream it because every time we do stream the Game Awards live on YouTube, we always end up getting a copyright claim on our video and it gets taken down, and we go through all the effort of streaming the award show for nothing basically because no one is able to see it. Although we will be making a couple videos on what we saw at the Game Awards and what we thought of the award winners there as well. Let me know if you agree with what our picks for the best games of the year are. And let me know if I missed a game in this video that you think should be on this list. That's all for this video, guys. If you like the content and want to see more, please like and subscribe. We publish brand new content every day, so there's always something new for you to watch. Thanks for watching this video, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye-bye.